Hello. Well, wait for a couple of you to show up on the usual no notice. When you do pop in, let me know if. Oh, we got one of the kids going off. Hopefully, the wife can handle that. Yeah, the little one's been teething a bit. Anyway, let me know if you can hear me okay. Seems to be dealing with it, so. Hello, Rakir number 6. I wonder what happened to Rakir 1 through 5, though. Hello, Douglas. Hello, Carlos. Yeah, so today I was going to talk a little bit about martial arts in generic terms in Catholicism and how they tie together and how they have tied together in history, which is quite an interesting. I see and hear you. Thank you, Carlos. I like people that follow instructions. So I've still got my little shot of grappa here. Oh, one of the other little guys is going crazy. I don't know. Maybe I should. Sam Werb, hi from Mid-Ohio, USA. Sound level is okay so far. Good. I might have to pop out for a second if I need to help with one of the kids, but and if I do, I'm in my underpants, so that's gonna get all the gay guys and the women excited. But the little dude is stomping around. Hello, Wootenbear. Well, I'm all right. We'll punch where instructed. Very good. Actually, tomorrow we're going to be doing some filming for the Sistema series, so it's it's been a little bit on my mind how to like explain some of the Sistema stuff and how to demonstrate it and so on. And yeah, the intersection of fighting and Catholicism is actually very interesting. The reason I say that is because if you look at all martial arts that are, shall we say, real martial arts, like effective martial arts, they are tied to religion. And it was one of my Sistema instructors that made me aware of this. And that's because, essentially, as it says in Gorin no Sho, Book of Five Rings of Miyamoto Musashi, killing is not the way of man. So we have to practice. And the reality is that if you just, do the things that war makes you do or requires of you, and you don't have some connection to the truth, to spirituality, to reality, the real spiritual things, you're going to essentially not do well. You're not going to be able to retain your humanity as such. So, for example, samurais was tied to Shintoism very deeply, and the samurai, you can consider them to have been quite brutal and unforgiving and merciless, which it was, because it was a culture of death. The way of war is essentially to choose death all the time. That is, in summary, that's what samurais did, but it was tied to their religion, Shintoism. Similarly, with the Chinese, and a lot of their martial arts are tied to Taoism. The Buddhists also, Buddhist monks performed various martial disciplines. In fact, what a lot of people don't know is that Tibet they were the baddest guys in the whole area. They basically literally kicked everybody's ass, and then once they finished kicking everybody's ass and it was just them, they were like, what are we going to do now? Oh, well, we're going to seek peace and meditation. And they became, monks, and then China came over and kicked their ass because now they weren't fighters anymore. So the point of martial art, Carlos mentions Krav Maga. Krav Maga is, of course, the Israeli martial art, which everybody says is so deadly and blah blah blah. And Krav Maga is just an attempt to use the most brutal, hardcore maneuvers of any other martial art and package them all together as something. I've never personally found Krav Maga guys to be particularly effective. They're, you know, the ones that I've met that had some measure of skill, they're quite hardcore in the sense that they go hard and they you know, it's quite easy to get injured training with them, or to injure them, or to get injured by them, because they tend to do everything like very, you know. But in terms of effectiveness, in terms of having to actually deal with them in a real life situation rather than, you know, in training, I don't rate them particularly highly or anything. You know, I'm sure there's some very high level practitioner of Krav Maga that is quite dangerous, no doubt, but in my experience, they've not been very effective. And again, I want to differentiate between training and application, because in training, you can get injured by a guy who knows nothing. You could be an instructor and you could get injured by a guy who knows nothing because you're training. So you're in training mode and you're like, okay, if you throw a punch and the guy just comes at you full force and you're like, that's not really what I was meaning, and maybe he'll catch you once in a while. I was pretty lucky. I've never really, you know, injuries happen or whatever, but my injuries were generally with other people that I was training with or whatever, not because some newbie just like clocked me or whatever, but it can happen. And also in training, you're in training mode, like I said, so you're not really trying to, you know, hurt each other, and you're going hard and you're going fast, but there's still rules, there is still a kind of understanding, there is a kind of, while an actual fight, an actual street fight, and training will help you against the street fight, but it's a different thing, you know. Yeah, sorry, this little guy keeps running around. Just give me a second, I'll be right back. And if you get to see my sexy underpants, just clap. Well, there you go. I'm sure that's going to get clipped for all sorts of gammas. Gavril, very good. Yeah. Did you ever fight Vox Day? No. Why would I? He's a good guy. But yeah, so what I was saying is that in every martial art that is real, there is a connection to something higher than us. One of the points that I quite liked about The Matrix was that they used martial arts in it because it was the closest thing they could figure out between spirituality and the world, and you know, and physicality. So that was, and by the way, The Matrix was not done by the two trannies that are now, you know, whatever, the two brothers that now became sisters or whatever. They actually stole all of that from a guy who wrote the comic book, and his comment was like, I just wish they'd do a better job of representing the stuff they stole from me. So Hacken Feldman says underwear. Fair enough, you must beat the heat. It's pretty normal in Italy. A lot of people just wander around in their underpants, both in and out of the house. In fact, the most loyal henchman and the next door neighbors is an old tough dude, and we went there to help him with something, and he was in his underpants. And when we came back, the most loyal henchman goes, "Hey, what do you think of that guy's like short shorts?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He had like these really tight little shorts. Like, it was like, dude, that's his underwear. He was just hot, and took his trousers off. It's like, it's not a big deal. So, but the rest of the puritanical Protestant world gets really freaked out about it. Anyway, Carlos understands. So anyway, the point was that if you look at any martial arts, so if you look at karate, judo, jiu-jitsu, they're all from the Japanese side of things, and they all connect to Shintoism. The Tibetans, that were like the biggest, baddest bastards in that whole area, when they killed everybody off and then they became peaceful, they meditated to connect with Buddhism. And again, if you look, Krav Maga was saying, now Krav Maga is a little bit different because I think that's purely secular. I don't think that Krav Maga connects to anything other than the world, which is why it's not particularly effective. It's just like, oh, you go for the eyes, you go for the nose, you go for the testicles. But that's pretty much what happens in a street fight anyways. It doesn't have any higher philosophy that I'm aware of at all. So, yeah. Sistema has been pushed by certainly the Ryabko version of it as being connected to Orthodox Christianity. But the reality is there was, of course, a Soviet military system that was, military science, really. That said, undoubtedly, there is an ideology, a philosophy connected to Christianity in Sistema. And I personally have found that, weirdly enough, because I experimented with this, I talk about it in the Sistema book, if you pray while you're doing certain exercises that require you to just hold your breath, to not breathe, you can last a little bit longer. Certainly I lasted a little bit longer when I was doing a Hail Mary than if I was just doing the, the Orthodox sort of Lord have mercy prayer. And that was empirically tested by me at some length. So it seems to me that Catholicism works even better in my mind. But Carlos says, I didn't see any Judaism in Krav Maga, just saw Israelis. That's my point. I don't think Krav Maga is connected to any higher ideology, just purely secular stuff. A little bit like MMA training, it's just like, oh, I can kick and I can do this and I can do that. And MMA is a bit of a mixture of everything. So you'll get guys that are, maybe they have some philosophy or whatever because it came from some other martial art they did. But in general, MMA is just kind of a dumb man's sort of fighting style, which I'm not saying it's not effective or it's not good or anything like that, but it's sort of like just trying to be as practical as you can. And what I've found is that when you get, equally committed people of, let's say proportionally, same size, same level of fitness, that sort of thing, and both really intending to win, it is invariably true. And again, let's say an equal level of talent. This is extremely hypothetical, okay, because you don't get that anywhere. But generally speaking, let's say that there are two guys that are the same size, the same fitness, the same ability, the same talent, and the only difference is one has done one martial art that has a quite deep connection to the spiritual, whether it's proper karate do, whether it's Sistema with like a Christian emphasis, whether it's jiu-jitsu with a a Budo emphasis or something like that. And the other guy is an MMA guy. And they're fighting for real. They're not fighting for points. They're not fighting for a cup or win in a shall we say protected setting, but they're actually in a real fight. I'd bet my money just about every time on the guy that has the religious component, if you like, because I suppose the quickest way to explain it boils down to something my grandfather told me years ago. Now, my granddad did a little bit of boxing. Certainly there was no Oriental martial arts when he was around or whatever. But you know, he saw some stuff. He went through some 2 world wars. He had a kind of a character. You know, he used to have a broom-handled Mauser that he used to walk through the park where they mugged people, hoping to get mugged until he got mugged. It didn't go well for the guys who tried to mug him. But anyway, so what I mean is, you know, he had that, even though he was very cold-blooded dude, he still had that generic up there filotto kind of attitude to things. And you know, I was doing karate at the time. I was a teenager. My dad had done karate for a long time, and he said to me, "Oh, does that stuff help in a real fight?" I said, "Yeah, no, it makes a difference." And he goes, "I don't know about this stuff. I never did it, but one thing I know is, like, don't pick a fight with a guy who's right." You know, what do you mean? Says, well, a man who knows he's right and is fighting with something real, don't fuck with that guy. It doesn't matter if you know karate or not. And succinctly, that wraps up the point I was trying to make. You know, it's quite a thing to fight with a guy that's got a conviction that is bigger than his own, you know, humanity, let's say. Wooly Ram says it's going to be 36 degrees Celsius around the Mediterranean Sea this weekend. There's a reason togas and tunics were popular here before AC was invented, indeed. And also, being naked as a guy wasn't, you know, seen as a thing, really. Gabriel also asked, quick aside, what year edition is your dictionary set? Also, never pick a fight with a bricklayer. Oh, I don't think I picked the fight with him, but he certainly picked it with me. Didn't go well for him, though. So, yeah. Yeah, bricklayers are pretty tough guys, but, you know, again, these are just like rough men. And don't get me wrong, a rough thug, a rough street fighter, a guy who's been in jail and had a few fights, you know, that guy's going to be a hardcore fighter compared to like a guy who's just trained in like his nice white gi and doing taekwondo. Yeah, I can do high kicks. You know, taekwondo is another one of those martial arts that I don't really rate very much because, yeah, they do really fancy kicks and stuff. And again, I'm sure that they, you know, Koreans that were fighting in Korea that were doing taekwondo then, that taekwondo probably just as effective as old karate, you know. But modern taekwondo, it's really just like a point thing. Aikido, again, I personally don't rate the Aikido people that I've seen and that I've trained with, but my father's Japanese karate instructor was a 7th Dan Aikido, and that guy, yeah, you wouldn't want to fuck, you know, he's passed on now, but you wouldn't want to fuck with him back then, you know, but that Aikido was proper Aikido. So, you know, there's also, you got to differentiate between the real martial art, which comes from a martial system, in other words, a system that was used to train people that were going to war, compared to, you know, the sports version that is done like when you sign a waiver and you get a doctor's note to make sure you can train and all that shit. I don't know, Gavril is kind of bugging now with that question. Let's see if I can answer it. So let's see what year it is. So it says 1870, 13 volumes, being a corrected reissue, edited blah blah blah. First published in 1933, reprinted 1961, 1970. So I guess this is the 1970 edition. It's in very good order, very clean. But keep in mind that although it was published in 1933 for the first time, it took like decades to put together. It was started in the 1800s. You should really watch that that film with Sean Penn and Mel Gibson, The Professor and the Madman. Brilliant film. But now we come to Catholicism. Here we go. And martial arts. Now, the Catholic religion, especially because it's been, of course, hidden and bastardized for the last 70 years or so, would at first glance not appear to have any martial art traditions tied to it, but this is absolutely incorrect. And those of you who have read Rodney Stark's God's Battalions, there's only a brief passage in there that talks about it. But it's a very interesting passage because it identifies the fact that Catholic barons, Catholic knights, and so on, these guys were trained from birth to be warriors. And although killing is not the way of man, and Catholicism is the religion that understands that better than any other religion, quite clearly, Catholicism is totally against the idea of killing people, if at all you can help it. Nevertheless, because Catholicism is based in absolute reality, it understands that it is sometimes necessary. So, keep in mind that Catholic knights, barons, etc. used to have to go to war, used to fight for the faith, used to fight with Muslims, and even though they had dispensation from Urban II, the Pope, that whatever their sins they would do in war would be forgiven, they nevertheless had to do penance. And sometimes, these weren't light penances. It was like, go back to Jerusalem, walk 3 times around Jerusalem barefoot, while you're praying, in a hair shirt, and then come back, and once you've done that penance, I'll give you absolution. It was that kind of penance. So killing was always considered a bad thing, but understood to sometimes be necessary. And in fact, per Catholic dogma, if you are a Catholic and you do not do violence in order to prevent violence or defend somebody that is especially a Catholic, a member of your family, a weaker person, it is your duty, it is considered a duty as a Catholic for you to take on evil forces that are using violence. Now, there are, of course, there have been a lot of Catholic martyrs who possibly refused to do violence and would choose to go to their death with dignity and honor and their head held high. There were a bunch of nuns that were executed for essentially being nuns, who sang on the way to the gallows. Brave ladies, brave, If you look at the heroic events that took place, that Catholic martyrs undertook, it's astonishing. It's an incredibly rich history that you should be aware of. But the people who became the Crusaders, the Conquistadors, Charles Martel, these kind of people, these guys were trained from birth to be warriors. And when they weren't fighting each other or fighting enemies, they were practicing. They were like hunting boars with lances and so on. They were jousting. So there is an ancient tradition of martial systems with Catholicism. The interesting thing is that there wasn't, and there isn't, as far as I'm aware, a martial art connected to Catholicism, which I find very interesting because all that we have is martial systems. Because a Catholic will avoid violence as much as possible. When it's time to do it, he's not fucking around. He's now killing people because it's now the time to do it. And the whole concept of just war is based on this. So there's no need for a martial art or fancy play fighting that is advanced play fighting. It's like, okay, when we really need to fucking fight back, load up your guns. It's not like, oh, well, but yes, great. And if you're a fighter, if you're a warrior, if you've been trained for that all your life, you're going to know how to use a rock as much as you're going to use, the latest fucking drone or sniper rifle or whatever, tank, You're going to be able to use whatever weapon. I mean, like, this is true in every real martial art. Again, in Karate-Do, people think, oh, Karate is just about striking and kicking. No. Proper Karate involves locks, involves rolling around on the floor, involves, like, in your gradings. You can poke a guy in the eye. You can kick him in the balls. You can bite his ear off. No one's going to tell you, no, that's not on, because it's as realistic as it gets. And, it's always been a thing that any object becomes a weapon. Any object can be a weapon. And in Sistema, like my friend Vadim says, it's like, look, any part of fist can be correct weapon. You just have to learn to use. You know, you can hit with this part, with this part, with this part. Think like a mace. Any part of the mace that hits you is not good. Kind of right. So, let me just keep up the chat here, because I like it when you guys throw comments in. So don't worry about that. But yeah, Willie Ram says, speaking of the connection between warrior and cult, what was the religious element of training a Christian knight? Oh, well, Christian knights were Christians. You know, they had to go to mass. The thing, if you saw I don't know if you guys had a chance to see the holder image I had for this video, but it's basically of two soldiers, look like World War I soldiers with bayonets fixed. One, it looks like he's dead, and his friend is over him, like, you know, with his rifle. And behind them, there's like a crusader knight, as in sort of spirit, ghostly form. I picked that image for a good reason, and that is the essence of a Catholic knight or a Catholic warrior. A Catholic warrior, the element, the religious element, is simply Catholicism. Catholic knights used to bend their knee at Mass, and of course they didn't take the host in the hand, and sometimes they only had Mass once a year. For the Crusaders, to have Mass was like an extremely important thing. You would not miss it. They had traveling priests that would travel with them just to give the Mass, and sometimes this only happened once a month, if they were lucky, once a year sometimes. They carried with them huge baptisms